I was talking with Kadam Morton, the main teacher at Kadampa Meditation Center in New York City, and he was talking about how, if we have our life and our work life and then our spiritual practice as separate things, like one is here,
Mm,
one's over here. I have,
mm,
we think like, oh, I have 10, 15 minutes or maybe even 30 minutes a day to do my meditation. And I just keep that outside of my work and life. It's like something I do to enhance my work and life, but it's separate from it. And we think of, if you're a spiritual practitioner, you think, oh, I want to go on like a long retreat, like a weekend retreat or a week retreat, and like that's when I'm really going to make progress. But it creates this dichotomy where we're always like putting our real practice in the future versus how do we have what we're talking about, like the blue sky mind, the clarity, the peace as the core of who we are. Like that's where we're starting from, and everything around our life is to enhance that and to learn how to be peaceful all the time, the challenges,
mhm.
the good things, the bad things. It's like, how do we make that sense of our potential and possibility and our underlying peace the base of how we see ourselves, and then everything else feeds into that. And then there's no like dichotomy, right? We can be meditating 24 hours a day, which we know is Kadampa Buddhist. That's our goal, is how do you meditate 24 hours a day so we're always making progress in training our mind and transforming our mind.
Okay, that's such a good point. And it's so important, isn't it? So, and Kadam Morton's so good example of this. He's such an amazing teacher. So exactly. And one thing I learned as soon as I started going to the center in Hong Kong, I started with the what's called the foundation program, a study program, like 4 hours a week at the time on Saturday. That's how I met the tradition. So I went full on into studying, and I very quickly learned. They were telling me, the teachers, as they do everywhere in any Kadampa center, we're told your work is your spiritual path. Your family is your spiritual path. Like that is your monastery. That's where you're practicing. Like, don't think this is somehow separate, right?
Yeah.
And particularly, we have certain karma. Like we might have the karma to be just a working Kadampa, right? We might have the karma to just not need to work. Very few people have that karma nowadays, but there's a few, right? But I think people might have this maybe antiquated view of a spiritual person as someone floating around who doesn't have a job or career or family or mortgage or student debt to pay off, right? But it's
Yeah.
no, all of us. And yeah, so early on, I was encouraged constantly in every single class, every Dharma discussion, any problem I brought up at work, that like, there's your patience practice, or there's your loving kindness practice, cherishing others.
Yeah.
Um, so that, and that's how you're meditating all day, which is the great Kadampa masters would teach, right? They'd say you have formal meditation where you sit like for 10, 15 minutes, right? To begin with. And then you have what's called meditation break. That doesn't mean it's a break from meditating. That means how you meditate during the break, right? Isn't that true? That's
Yeah.
what it means.
Outside your formal meditation, exactly.
But you're still meditating. So
Yeah.
we have what's called an object for the break. So if you do, for example, a daily Lam Rim practice like I do, which is you cycle through 21 meditations. So for example, this morning happened to be the first one, Precious Human Life. Right. So in my meditation this morning, I spent time contemplating, I'm alive, right? Like, oh my gosh. And I don't know how long I have. I don't know how long. We don't, none of us know, right? And then, okay, if time, to your point, impermanence, we don't know when it's going to stop. And we have this mind, and we have the ability to train the mind. And so many living beings do not have the good fortune to even think about training the mind. They're too busy surviving, right?
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
people? So anyway, you contemplate on this sense of extreme gratitude, and then this kind of meditation object coming of, I'm going to practice sincerely and purely, like I'm going to train my mind, right? So that was my morning meditation object, right? Formal meditation. So then I go into my day. So the idea is I then keep recollecting that insight that I was trying to generate, which is if, yeah, like being like in the middle of a meeting, right? Or got a deadline coming, and then maybe write on a post-it note and stick it on our computer, right? Somewhere. Precious human life, right? And so during the day, we're remembering. And just think about how your work day is going to shift. If you're going to go through the day and like, oh, lunch, and maybe you're on site that day and you're going to the cafeteria or something, right? And you're sitting around and chatting with your colleagues, and then suddenly you're remembering precious human life. Maybe you've put on your phone like a reminder for 3 times a day, precious human life, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then during the day, you're going back to that object, yeah. And also it's now naturally integrating into your daily life. And one thing we haven't touched on yet, and I've no idea on timing, maybe it's the final question because we've been going up. But I think an important piece is cherishing others.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so particularly, so the entire path to enlightenment is about cherishing others, isn't it? Like Geshe says that. What does he say? Something like the path to enlightenment is very simple. We just need to learn how to stop cherishing ourselves and learn how to cherish others.
Yeah.
So still care for ourselves, but the main thing is, where's our big energy going? And is it on ourselves or is it on others? And I do think like that's the biggest training, I think, in our world of work, which is you spend as much time as possible cherishing those around you. And I honestly, like, that is the definition of being good at work, right?
Yeah.
Cherishing everyone around you. Like, isn't that what it's about?
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Especially as a leader, it's such an important like skill to have. Yeah. I, a couple of things that came to mind from the points you were making before about training in the meditation break during the day. It just reminded me of one thing Kadam Morin, an insight he gave was, or a recommendation was like when you're going throughout your meditation break, like when you're not in that formal session, how can you get back to your next meditation with a deeper insight? Like you feel like you've progressed in your understanding and insight. And like when finish your meditation, having this lens, like, okay, what am I going to learn today? How can I even asking the question, how am I going to get to my meditation object? With a deeper understanding, deeper insight. So then, like Geshe says, how do we use our meditation break to enhance our meditation object? And then another thing from the training the mind teachings, I think Geshe Chekawa, it's the train in every activity by words, which basically means like have a little mantra, some kind of thing we can say to ourselves to remember our meditation object. So, like in the practice of patience, right, is something like, I need this, right? The opposite of aversion and pushing away is I need this. I need this to train my mind. And whenever difficulty comes, like remembering these little things we can say that help us to achieve the meditation object. And of course, I definitely agree. One of our core meditation objects for the workplace is cherishing others, because when we are working, we are always working for somebody. It doesn't matter if we run our own business, we're working for our customers. If we're in a big company, we're working for the company and our boss. And how do we cherish the person we're working for, help them be successful, all the people around us? That's the attitude of cherishing others versus how much can I get out of this for how little work, kind of like self-centered attitude, like it's about me and you're making my life difficult. That kind of mind comes from that self-centered view. And if you just look at from the quality of the mind, which one makes us happier, it's very easy to see that cherishing others as an attitude in our job, in our work, in our life, it just is so much more fulfilling, and it makes our mind happy in every moment that we're doing it, versus the opposite of self-centered view, just thinking about ourselves. It's like Scrooge, is like the embodiment of the self-centered view. And of course, we're different degrees of that at all time, but how can we be less that self-centered mind, just wanting for ourselves, and more like giving, generous, and so on.
Totally. By the way, just a side note, I love what's fun about this discussion for me is we don't often hear from leadership on these things. So I think it's cool you're doing this in the C-suite, because I think we're hearing, and obviously there's a lot of stressed out workers right now, and it's really helpful to also remember that includes the people at the top, right? It's not just like everyone's totally fine. I remember one great behavioral health leader saying that to me of like and she was basically saying we need equanimity. Everybody's struggling, right? And that's
Yeah.
of course what Buddha taught. Everybody's struggling, no matter how flashy their title might be, right? Or how
Yeah.
everyone's struggling. And that sense of equality, we're all just trying to be happy. We're trying to not suffer, but we're all struggling because it is difficult. And that's what I love about Buddhism. It's so real, isn't it? It's not
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is all going to work out unless we change our minds. It kind of isn't, right? We really do need to do that work. But yeah, I think it's helpful remembering and you know, learning to, it's called, the meditations equalizing self and other, right? Exchanging self and other. This whole series of meditations, developing great compassion, bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment. It's like this unbelievably scientific leveled approach, right?
Yeah.
And but it begins with affectionate love, and that means it begins with learning to like people.
For sure.
Right. So right now it's like we might like love, I don't know, a handful of living beings, and then we kind of like some, and then most of them don't. You know, there's a lot of people. It's probably
Yeah.
like this, right? So what meditation practice that starts doing to us as the more we study, practice, we learn these meditations, others are just as important as me. They're just like me. They are just like me. And then at work, what I would then start doing is in most meetings, I would start bringing in that recognition, just like me, just like, and start connecting with the real human there.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, solve the problem, you know, and it can't always be, you know, sometimes just businesses, right? So sometimes you've got to make hard decisions or whatever. But you know, another great master, well, Atisha, advice from Atisha's heart. I was actually got to teach on this last night in
Nice.
Portland. So one of his amazing sayings, um, let me read it to you so I get it right. Hold on a sec. Again, oh, I have it highlighted.
Mm.
So this is when, and again, the 11th century Tibet, he basically gave this unbelievable teaching, which is a series of one lines, and you can meditate on a one line for the rest of your life. Like, so he has this line: always keep a smiling face and a loving mind, and speak truthfully without malice.
Mm.
Always keep a smiling face and a loving mind, and speak truthfully without malice. I've been thinking about that this past week a lot because I mean, that's a great recipe for being at work, right? So keep smiling face, meaning be agreeable, right? Even when maybe thunderstorm is kicking off within, try to keep smiling, right? Whatever, if we can. We don't need to fake it too much. But then loving mind, right? So the smiling face is coming from the loving mind. So it's all about the loving mind. But then also speak truthfully without malice. So he's not saying speak kindly or like avoid conflict, right?
Right.
He's saying just speak truthfully, but without malice.
Yeah.
Because I think at work we like in families, like we sometimes have to have difficult conversations, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that with a loving mind without malice? And
Yeah.
I think if we can learn to do that and have a really loving mind and then do what we need to do, I think we'll be great.
I agree. Yeah, I love that. And it's like the without malice part, it's like, we're on everybody's team. And if we feel like we're on
Mm,
everybody's team, like when someone's on your team, there's like
nice.
a degree of loyalty there, right? And so you
Yeah.
want to protect and you want to help and enable and encourage people who are on your team because you realize we are successful together, which is another, core
Mm,
component of the love meditations, realizing the interconnection we have with everybody. We're not separate from anybody. And that if I succeed, you succeed. And that is true of literally anybody we are with. Even if we
mhm.
don't like them, well, that's the problem. We don't like them. And if we feel like they're on our team,
Mm.
then that shift will change our mind so that we do like them. We think we win together. And then how is there any basis for like malice, when you recognize we all succeed together?
Yes. And
Yeah.
and yeah, and admiring their good qualities instead of getting jealous. That's another line he says near that one. Yeah. So what an amazing discussion for me,
Yeah.
at least. I
No,
mean, I really
I feel like
enjoyed
very
that.
practical,